Omar Nordin is the Vice President of the Muslim Public Affairs Council. He joins me now to talk about this. There's been a lot of back and forth with these demands. I'm curious how this situation is now as you see it. Where is it headed? There doesn't seem to be a lot of compromise when you look at the demands.
No, there hasn't been compromise when it comes to the demands. And actually, Qatar announced that it was going to increase its natural gas exports by 30% over the next 5 years and flood the market. And, you know, this is actually a direct comment to the Trump administration, which has been trying to strike some deals in Asia, particularly South Korea and China, on natural gas. So it's kind of putting a trump card to Trump.
Yeah, and it's also an economic, hey, look at us, we're just fine as well in many ways. I'm curious whether you think how much of this is about Qatari actions, as the Saudis and others say, its support for fundamentalist groups, and how much is more about Saudi desires for, if you like, domination regionally speaking and certainly geopolitically.
This is really a regional dispute, and Saudi has never been happy with Qatar punching above its weight class, so to speak. As a small country compared to Saudi Arabia wants to be the regional hegemon. And Qatar has been doing some things, particularly with hosting military bases, so the Al Adid base, the US base in Qatar, and Turkish air bases in Qatar, in addition to Al Jazeera, which is, you know, a major international network that has covered the Arab Spring in a way that the Saudis don't like.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting too, because there's no shortage of people that say that Saudi Arabia pointing its finger at Qatar for support of extremist groups or terrorist groups. You know, Saudis in the past have been accused of doing the same thing in terms of exporting certainly radical ideology, if not directly, then indirectly allowing it to be so. And thousands of Saudis have gone to join ISIS.
Well, you know, there's really no innocent party in the Gulf when it comes to these issues. And Saudi placing this blame game on Qatar, and Qatar is the one that has the problem with financing terrorism, is really meant to deflect from itself. And you know, they've outsmarted President Trump when it comes to it. Establishing this global center to fight terrorism in Saudi Arabia gives them a cover to not kind of do the internal work that they need to do to address these issues.
A couple of things. You mentioned the Turkish air base. How much of a complication has been the support for Qatar from not just Turkey but Iran? I mean, that is not something the Saudis like to see.
No, and you know, Qatar shares the largest natural gas field with Iran under the Persian Gulf. So any further isolation of Qatar will only push them closer to Iran, which isn't in the U.S. best interest. And, you know, today everything's about Russia. That leaves a room for Russia to come in. Russia is the other big player in natural gas. It has 19 or 12 to 19 pipes that go into Europe. And if there's the U.S. further isolates Iran and Qatar, that leaves room for Russia to come in and be a bigger player in the natural gas scene.
You mentioned Donald Trump. When this erupted, you had Donald Trump coming off that trip to Saudi Arabia and almost in his tweets claiming credit for what the Saudis had done. At the same time, the US, as you also said, has a major and very important strategically military base in Qatar. Did that support for what the Saudis had done give them cover or enable them to go further than they might otherwise have done?
I think absolutely. You know, this isn't the first time the Saudis have done this. In 2014, they played some similar games and the Obama administration wasn't having it and they backed off. I think now they feel emboldened, especially with the support not only of Trump but of President Sisi in Egypt. And President Sisi in Egypt has a similar goal as the Saudis do in limiting Qatar's influence, particularly its support of Al Jazeera.
And just finally, too, as with other issues, the Trump administration isn't always united in its approach and its positions. You got Donald Trump saying one thing, Rex Tillerson being, you know, a little bit more moderate in his views. Does that confuse the waters, diplomatically speaking?
Of course, and not just Rex Tillerson. The Pentagon issued statements saying that Qatar is a crucial ally. And actually, President Trump, in his speech in Saudi Arabia, named Qatar as a crucial strategic ally. So you have Trump saying one thing in a speech that obviously was written for him by someone else, and what he's tweeting out. That type of instability and that type of uncertainty allows others to manipulate the situation, namely Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Russia.
Omar Noureddin, Vice President of the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much.
Thank you.